Hello, hello. Yep. So welcome to the 2019 edition of the V8 talk. Before we start, just quick questions. How many of you were there at the 2018 edition of the V8 talk? 2017 edition of the V8 talk? 2016? Yes. 2014? 13? So it goes back a long way. We have sad news. This is the last V8 talk. Next year we are having a V9 talk, so please come next year. Can you explain us how this last edition is going to work?
Yes, so we're going to bring back a bit of fun. Stephane and I did something a couple years ago, and we're going to bring that back, but in a new and interesting way, with the Lucky Wheel of Fortune. Yep, so because we're using Google Slides and I don't like them, there's going to be some demo fails here in a sec, but I'll give you a quick demo of how that's going to work. Maybe we'll see. Hang on. No, hang on. There we go. One sec. Yes. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to click this. And the first thing we're going to talk about is dependencies. All right.
This is so fucking dumb.
Especially with presenter view. So, dependencies.
Stephane, hold music.
Sorry? Oh. No.
How awesome is like Google Slides with presenter view? Yeah, thanks, Claus.
Works perfectly.
Yeah. So, let's talk about the latest dependencies and libraries. Also, this talk isn't about what we're going to do in V8. This is talking about what we have in V8, what you can do right now, and potentially some like cool hidden gems, maybe some things you haven't learned about in the past 5 years. So some latest dependency framework library news. We are using .NET 4.7.2 in Umbraco 8, and there's a few reasons for this. Not only that it's not actually the latest framework version now, there's 4.8, but 4.7.2 is actually the only real stable version of .NET Framework that works with web application projects in Visual Studio. So if you try like 4.6.2, maybe even 1, and 4.7.0 and 1, you will have lots of problems. Microsoft had to fix all of these things with their tooling, and 4.7.2 is really the only one that worked for our projects. So there's a few reasons why we're on this. Anything else to add to that one?
It just doesn't work on 4.6.
Yeah.
Simple as.
And Microsoft they've given up fixing it. They just say use that one.
What's interesting is 4.8 has a new JIT compiler, which is actually borrowed from .NET Core. So I'm actually quite interested to see if we can do some benchmarking between running it in the 4.8 runtime versus 4.7.2, because we might actually see some performance improvements. But yet to be discovered. We'll see. The next up is we've got the latest Angular JS. Currently we're running 1.7.5. We started at 1.7.0, and we didn't realize that this dead framework would have new releases out every month, pretty much. So we're on 1.7.5 now. We're actually 3 releases behind. 1.7.8 is out, so we'll probably update to that for 8.1. And they've actually been adding a few new features in these bug fix releases. So who knew? We'll see how far it goes. So these are the dependencies that we depend on, and I've put this little sort of chart together here to talk about net standard. So in V8, we've got light inject, markdown, Newtonsoft.json, semver, Serilog, which we'll talk about in another slide, npoco, HTML agility pack. These are all net standard compliant, which is good news for us because that means we don't have to do anything with these libraries to go to .NET Core at all. They'll just work. On the right-hand side, so Mini Profiler and LucyNet are not net standard compliant with the versions we're using, but they have versions that are, so it's not going to be a big deal to move there. The rest of them that are red are not net standard compliant at all, but because we own Examine, Client Dependency, and Models Builder. Those ones are easy. We can port that over. SQL CE, image processor, will never be net standard compliant. Those will only ever work on net framework. But we have a plan to target that. So we mentioned the RFCs yesterday. If you want to have a look at our .NET Core plan, it's in an RFC with nice diagrams and everything, and it tells you how we're going to deal with these things.
But we're not supposed to talk about the future.
No.
No.
The RFCs we have now, right? Web forms, gone.
Long
Killed.
live. It's good.
Totally gone.
Almost.
Almost.
Shush.
There is one file left, which is nonodes.aspx. We're working on it. But everything else in web forms is totally gone. Yep, so that was dependencies. Let's see what we've got next with our lucky wheel. And our sound's gone.
What?
How disappointing.
Yeah, there we go. Oh, now I get to keep talking. I'm actually supposed to remove these when I'm done so we don't get them again. Okay, so we'll do a quick examine talk. That was convenient.
What about your presenters?
We'll take it. So, Examine 1.0 is out in V8. This is very different from the Examine 0.9. It's probably been worked on for as long as 8. I think Niels Kuhnel also helped with V8 about 5 years ago. Helped with Examine 1. So, first thing to note is we've got faster startup times. And that's because in V8, media is not part of the index. The index in V8 and Examine is for searching, which is what it should be used for. That's it. So it means that your site is not like completely dependent on indexes. So when indexes are empty and they need to rebuild, your site's still going to start and indexes rebuild in the background. So that's good. So media cache, yeah, you can.
That dude's happy.
Yeah. Cool. The media cache is actually the same front-end cache that we use for content, and it's just there, and it works. So, yep, faster startup times because we don't have to wait for rebuilds. We've also moved to Lucene 303. 2941 is like 10 years old. 303 is much newer. I think it's 9. But at least it has better APIs and better library support. So we've moved there. If you want to look at one of these indexes to debug, you'll use Luke normally. If you go to the Luke download page that you'll Google, that one is only for 2941. It will not work. So you have to go to this old Google Code archive, and who knows when that will be taken down because Google Code is dead. I don't know where else you'll find this, so my advice is maybe to go download this and store it somewhere safe on your computer before it dies. Yep. Yeah. So you need Luke 1.01 to view the indexes. There is no more XML config for examine indexes at all, like those 2 big config files. So I don't know if you remember this, I'm sure you do. And then we also have this. And keep in mind, these are actually like the base config files. You haven't even added anything to it, and it's already very difficult to look at or understand.
This always used to blow my mind every time I looked at this.
Does anyone here like these particular config files? No. That's good. So these don't exist anymore. So you might wonder, how the heck do you configure an examine index? Well, right now we've had to, examine was made so long ago when, providers were cool in ASP.NET Framework. And it was config first approach. Well, now it's code first approach. And if we want to add config later, we can. And that's easy. But right now, you configure everything in code on startup. It's reasonably easy. Yes, I need to document it. I haven't done it yet. How does variance work? I'm probably taking up too much time here.
No, I think we're good.
So variance, we've decided to index per field. There's only 2 options. We can either index per field or have different indexes per language, because that's how Lucene works. So we've gone with per field, A, because it was easier for us to implement and quicker for us to get out, and also it still provides the flexibility for you to add different analyzers per language. maybe later we change it, but right now this is how it works. We've got some like system fields. You can check if a document actually varies by culture, yes or no. Check if it's actually published in that culture, yes or no. And then you can see we've got suffixed cultures on these fields. So the update date in EN/US might be that value, which is stored as long. I'll get to a slide about this in a sec. The title EN/US is hello, French, etc. And you see at the bottom on the geo-coordinates, this might be an invariant field. It's got no suffix. So that's how we're storing things. And you can configure each of these fields with a different analyzer if you chose to. So the features, we've got more flexibility, better abstractions, enhanced APIs, big performance boost, less data queries, automatically type values. So if you send in a date, it's just going to store it as a date should be stored. And Umbraco is totally decoupled from Lucy. I could go on and on and on about all of these for probably an entire talk, but we don't have time. But at the end of the day, it means that you can implement a custom examine provider, and it's possible, and I've made a proof of concept for that already alongside of 1.0, so that we can have indexes in the cloud properly, like Azure Search. Yes, you could have Elasticsearch, but I haven't made a provider for that, so it'll take a bit of work, but it's certainly possible. So that's examine 1. Yes. Nästa.
Dun, 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 dun.
No, I don't want to keep talking.
You know this is close to you.
Okay. Packages. Let's talk about packages. Where are they? There they are.
The system is great.
This system is wonderful, right?
It's flawed.
Packages! We've totally revamped some packages in V8. No dashboard config. I think there's like a theme here. We're removing a bit of config stuff. There's no dashboard config. There's no applications config. There's no trees config, right? These are all gone. And we didn't do that just because we don't like config files. There's a crazy reason. It's because when you make a package, you don't want to have to modify global files that the Umbraco ships with. You don't want to modify all these things, then that goes into your Git, and then you uninstall a package and it doesn't undo those files. We don't want that. We want you to ship a package with all the files that you need, and then when you remove a package, it removes all those files. And so that's what we've done. So there's no more global config file edits at all. That's because you can do everything in the package manifest that you will need to do, or in C#. So for an example, to make a dashboard, you can put that into your package manifest, define an alias view and your sections that you want it to show up in. There is more, which is documented, I believe.
Yes.
But this is just a simple example. Similarly, you can also do this in C#. So you can just implement iDashboard and configure it that way. What's very cool about this is that this is dependency injection compatible. So that means that I can inject, say, a localization service there, or a user service, or anything, and I could dynamically change the result of this. We don't know what the possibilities of this are yet, because we haven't really investigated, but imagine you could change the different access rules dynamically for different users, or the sections, or anything, or even the view. So that's kind of cool. Similarly, if I want to modify or add a section, this is it. I just say alias my section, name my section. It's going to show up there. Similarly, in C#, I can do the same thing. Also dependency injection compatible. I don't know what that means. Can I dynamically change an alias? Which means that if a user type has the alias allowed of a section, I don't know. Who knows? Give it a try, see what happens. What's also cool about sections is you don't have to define a tree to have a full screen section, right? So like the user section and the packages section, these are full screen apps, they have no tree. So define a section and then make a dashboard for that section, boom, full screen app, right?
Super simple.
That's it. Talking about trees, this is a very simple tree. It's not dissimilar from V7. You override two methods. In this case, this tree is going to do absolutely nothing. No menu, no nodes. But the point is, it's not a lot different from V7. So, So this is a created packages section, a new UI, no more web forms, no more ugly editors. So I can create a new package from here, fill out my details like I did in V7. We didn't add a ton of functionality here except for this new thing, which is called package options. And I think we're going to show you what that means. Yes. So, demo. Stephane, where's your music there? This is when I need to go duplicate. No, full screen. Come on, buddy.
Do you remember your password?
Maybe. Test, like every other year, which is my real password. What were we demoing again? Oh, packages.
Packages.
So I'm going to go install a local package. You can see my installed ones are here. I'll install this local package that I've previously made. Yep. We'll wait for that to restart. You had one job.
I'll leave it running, I think.
That's the only reason he's on stage.
Yeah, I have 10 hours of music.
Cool. Okay, so package options. My package is installed. Can you guys see that okay? At least reasonably?
Yeah.
Up here, we've got this query string. So once a package is installed, it goes to this screen, it passes in a package ID, which you could use to maybe look up that package metadata or whatever, just display it here. But the point is, you can show like a thank you page. We had this in V7 with old user control things.
Yeah, weird user control.
And then you can never go back.
No. So yeah, if you had configuration here, you would never be able to kind of get back to that.
That's changed. So you define package options, and yes, I'm not the UX or UI guy, which is why this button looks amazing.
It's pretty.
But you can see I can go back to package options. And you can see that didn't pass up the query string. So in this case, I'm dynamically changing this view. Did you just install it? I'm going to say thank you. Is it already installed and you just want to configure your package? Do it there. So now you don't have to ship with all crazy dashboards for your package to configure it. You can just configure it all
So that means I don't need to clutter the settings section now?
Yeah.
With like a shit ton of dashboards for every package?
Yeah, so configuration for a package is all in one nice spot. Yep. I believe that was the whole demo.
Yep. Spin the wheel, spin the wheel.
Yes, cool. Wheel.
Yeah.
Please don't be me, please don't be me. Yes! You want presenter view with notes, right?
If I can have notes, otherwise I'll improvise. But
Oh dear.
Maybe, but depends on how long it takes. I'm going to get them.
APIs? Is that
Yeah,
what we
find the
landed on?
APIs because the music is fading. So.
Which picture is APIs?
It's called simplified APIs.
This one.
Yes.
This one.
All right.
Okay.
Give me a moment. Give me a moment. We're getting there. How many developers does it take to open presenter view?
So
Lots.
I can start. We have simplified the APIs in V8, as you can see. Which means we've basically moved a lot of cheese around. So people are not sure
I'll stand here.
why things happen, but I'm going to explain why we've done it and the benefits of it. This is how you would manage content in version 7. Including the very vintage and beautiful namespaces, all lower cases and everything. And these are two totally different ways to do exactly the same thing, which means that if you're a new developer, or you're an agency hiring a new dev, you have to tell them, use the second one, And if IntelliSense is giving you the first one, don't use it. So I don't know, if you have manuals about the things to do and not to do, there's a learning curve here. So in version 8, we just say, no, there's only one way to do things, use it. So it's actually removing chase. When you want to access content, to render content, in version 7, you can do typed content and content. I don't know how you explain that to your new dev when they join, like use the right one. There's one that is dynamic, but we don't want to use dynamic. This is an agency policy. I don't know how you'd manage it. So we've said no. In version 8, it's only content, and it's not dynamic because dynamic is dead, I think.
It's dead.
It's a thing of the past. How do you render content? That one is very interesting. How many ways do you know to render a field in Umbraco 7? I think that I only have 2 here, field, Umbraco field and model get property. I think there are possibly 3, 4, 5 different ways to do things. Again, it's very hard to learn. How do you get the children of a content node? So in version 7 and 8, first versions 8, you can have a .children property. And this is the magic of C#. We also have a .children method that returns children. They both return children, but if you're using variants, they're not going to return exactly the same thing. Surprise.
Makes so much sense.
Now, how do you get the URL of a content? So you can do .url as a property, .url as a method, and we also have get URL, instead you want to really get it.
That's if you really want to get that URL.
Again, I mean, apart from, this is not just being purist, it means that you waste time figuring out things, teaching things to new devs, making sure what's the difference. So in version 8, we've simplified things, and 8.1 is going to go further, break a few things, but simplify everything by having only methods, and they don't have the get prefix, and there's only one way to do things, and they return the normal thing that you would expect.
And it works across variants, non-variants.
Yeah, because using methods allow us to like have culture in there, so you can say, can I have the name for that culture name? Can I have the URL for that culture? And it's always the same pattern, so you don't have to learn different ways. So it's simplifying the learning curve. Composing, so composing is building the application, like putting all the parts together and adding your own code so that it all runs. Funny enough, in Umbraco 7, this is called responding to Umbraco application handler events of some sort. So you probably know that, but it's hard to remember. You have an old application which is obsolete in version 7, but we still ship it in case you love it. And then you have a class, and then you have events which are...
There's also an interface that you're missing there too.
Sorry?
There's also an interface, application event handler.
Yeah, there's
what's
also,
the
yeah,
difference?
if you'd rather implement the interface, and don't ask me what's best, I don't know. And you have weird events when the application is initialized or starting or started, and when should we do things, it's hard to know. And how should I configure things? So we have tons of resolvers, so you probably love resolvers, you've learned to find them, so you know where they are, but a new dev who's joining is like, what should I use, how can I do it? So in 8, we say, well, if we're composing things, let's call this composing. So there's only one abstraction, which is composition. And it's the entry point to everything. So if I want to add Content Finder, I'm going to add Content Finder through composition. But all the things that you can change in 8, it always go through composition. Underneath, it's using...
Dependency injection.
Yeah. But this is a service that we use. It's nice because you can inject things, but this is all you have to know about dependency injection. Like you compose things using our abstraction, you inject things, that's all.
That's pretty much it. So using dependency injection, add it to your constructor, go.
Yeah, like you do probably if you're a front-ender in Angular, you just say, I need this. Oh, it's there, fine.
Same deal with
Yep.
C#. So, yeah.
And if you want to go beyond just tweaking things but adding your own code, we have a nice abstraction for that, which is the I component. And they initialize, which means Umbraco is ready. Now we're going to initialize the component.
And this is replacing initialize, started, like all those things. This is, I want to run code at startup.
Yeah, well, you have composing. I want to put things together, and then components, I want to run things. And the new things we have also is that components terminate. Like, you know, Umbraco is shutting down. So if you're having a task in the background or whatever, you can properly shut everything down because the website is going down, or I don't know, write to the logs or flush things or whatever. And that's it about API changes.
Yes.
Cleaner, simpler,
More
Better.
awesome.
better.
I'm not going full screen anymore. It's just sound. Yay! Thanks. So now we need to find that slide. Up or down?
I think it's up.
This one? No.
Nope.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
This one. This is horrible.
Yes. So, variance is one of the key features of V8, but really, I've been getting a lot of questions about why did you actually move the cheese? We don't really need the variance. I mean, we've been doing multilingual sites a long time, and it worked out really well. And I mean, I've been thinking the same thing. I did multilingual sites with various kind of solution, and it worked pretty well. But the thing is, I realized it really didn't work. I mean, I kind of made it work. So what we want to do with the variance is basically to make sure that we have one way of doing things that we want people to use. Some of the solutions I've been doing for my sites have involved doing separate content trees. That kind of works. It's not really a good solution, but it works. What else? Overrides, creating specific field for overriding specific other fields. It's not really a good solution, but it also works. Then I've been doing entire sets of overriding properties. That's a whole lot of work for the editors. And
how many people have done this? 1 tab per language?
Yeah. It's annoying, and it's, yeah. Then there's the last solution that I kind of like the best so far, using something like Vorto, a third-party plugin, which allows you to do proper sort of translations, but still there's some quirks in regards to having different URLs, and there's weird things. I never really found a good solution that I wanted to use for all my sites, so it's been some sort of hack to always make it work. So basically what I wanted to do is basically implement something that people can use for most scenarios. By doing it in the core, we actually allow us to do some pretty cool things that are not just hacked in by some package. We are, however, not completely naive. We know that this won't work for everyone, which is also why we're not really forcing you guys to use this. That is one of the really, really cool things about the variants, at least in my opinion. You are not necessarily forced to use it, and you can actually change your mind later on.
There is some benefits for the other approaches. So with variants, we've got one-to-one, it's strict, we've got URLs. Vorto is great, and if it works for you, keep using it. And it has features that one-to-one language variants might not as well. So we're not forcing you into a corner. I don't even know what happens. You could actually probably use Vorto on an invariant property on a variant.
You very likely could.
Be a thing.
Yeah, because Shannon, what if my site, what if I'm not entirely sure? Parts of my site, I think I love the V8 thing, but the rest I'm not sure. So am I forced to go to V8 variants for everything and then?
No, you can actually do a multi-implementation thing where you just take specific things and use whatever you had before for that, and you can enable variants on specific things you want to use variants for. So that brings me to the next one. Due to how these things were implemented before we had variants, changing things could be a rather annoying task. Usually I would end up having to migrate a whole lot of data because the whole structure of my content would change, and it was just seriously a pain. It's a lot of work, and it's not really the fun kind of work to migrate data and make sure that everything is where you expect it to be. So assuming you can actually fit your needs for your variant into our model for variants, it's actually become pretty easy to do this change from a non-variant site to a variant site. It's only a few clicks. You go to your doc type, enable variant by culture, which allows you to actually set this on specific properties as well. When you do this, everything is just variant.
So if I already have content there,
Yes.
and then I turn this on,
Then
does
all
my
your content-
site die and I
Yes,
lose
all your content is gone. No. That would be the case in some of the old scenarios, but we actually took care of this. So when you enable variants on your site, we just keep your content, place it in the default language, and you are allowed to put specific other things in other languages. If you don't do that, we have this other really, really awesome feature that is called fallback.
Before we get there, though,
Yes?
there's also something to consider is what if I set up my site as variant initially, and then I enter all my content, and then I decide, oh, the client doesn't want to pay for more languages, so now I'm putting them in a corner and they can only have
Yes.
one. If I undo that switch,
That's the cool thing about this. Then you go to your site, you disable variants, and you don't tell the client anything about you ever did this. So everything will be non-variant, and you will still keep your data. And then a month later, you go to the client, sell them this feature, and you enable it again, and all your old data that you had in your variants will actually still be in the database.
cool.
Yes. Anyway, if you don't have any data in your other languages, the next thing will be fallback. Fallback is basically allows you to just have languages fall back to something else if there's no data available. What is really cool about these fallbacks is the fact that you can actually specify different languages to fall back to other specific languages. It might not make sense right now, but considering something like Switzerland, falling back to French from German would make a whole lot of sense. The same case would not be in Denmark. I mean, we don't really like the French people, so we would rather fall back to English. So having that option is really nice. And while we're talking about the fallbacks, there's another really cool thing that people don't really realize. We have chain fallbacks, which means that you can actually have German fall back to French, and you can have French fall back to English, which means that if nothing is available in either German and French, you will fall back to the English one. It's basically chained all the way through.
And what's also cool is you can see the syntax on the bottom. You can declare a specific fallback, but you don't have to do this. If you don't declare any fallback, it uses the default fallback, which is a provider,
Yep.
right? And being a provider means you can replace it. If you can replace it, that means you can do whatever you want. Any sort of zany thing, I suppose, right? Maybe you fall back to some online dictionary.
It could be an option, for example, if you consider people which country they're from. Coming from Switzerland, it would make sense to do a specific fallback chain, but there might be some people coming from Germany who also use German language. They might not use the same fallback chain. So
and you can also define fallback per field, right? So this is getting a value per field. And it could be totally different from another one, or the default one, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's it on variants.
Cool. Nice. Let's see how the wheel goes. Remove. How are we for time? We started at 1:15, right?
Yeah.
So we got like 10-ish minutes. Oh, this is me. This is a long one. Okay. Bear with me. Hang on. I'll be quick. Where's my mouse? Duplicate. So let's get back to this one. Go up to Content Apps. Somewhere. Yep. Okay, so content apps, we know what they are, right? It's been all through the keynote and everything, but I'm just going to tell you about some cool things that maybe you don't know. So what is a content app? I think we all know now, but here's a quick example. This is a community example, which I thought was quite clever, called Linked Nodes. This is by Soren Digger? Sorry. So it shows up here, and you've got 4 things there. So I'm going to do a demo of this, but essentially what this does is it tells you, if you go to media, where your media is linked to. That's pretty clever, right? I think we all kind of want that. So that's a very interesting way to make a content app. So how do you make a content app? Well, it's also part of your package manifest. Again, not modifying global config files. Name, alias, icon, what the view you want is, and then we've got this interesting syntax with the show, which I think is a way to dynamically do something.
It's a way to define who will this section be shown to, and it's a very weird syntax that no one ever knows how it works. But
Apart from Stephane.
Yes, but he doesn't really know either, so it's documented. Go look at the documentation.
It's documented, and yeah.
It's documented. Speaking of dynamic content apps, can I? Sure you can. So if I want to make a content app in C#, you can do that. Implement iContent app factory. Again, DI compatible, so you can inject whatever you want there. You override a method called getContentApp4. You have access to the current user groups of that user, so you could dynamically do things based on permissions and whatnot. I also have access to the iContent that it's being rendered for, or the iMedia, or the iAnything, eventually if we extend content apps out to different sections. And then you could dynamically change the content app. Even more, you can actually dynamically inject a model into that content app from the server, which is quite powerful. So I don't know what you guys are going to come up with there, but I'm sure it will be great. There's another way, a bit more hacky way, but this actually exists in V7 too. Sending content model is an event. If I subscribe to this, the content apps is actually part of the model that gets sent to the editor. And you can modify whatever you want there. And this is actually after the iContent app factory executes. So this is after everything's compiled, before it gets sent down the pipeline to your user. You could modify the content apps here. Add, remove, insert, reorder, dynamically change things, go nuts. It's up to you. So that's in C#. And we do have docs on how to guide, package manifest info, how to create the C# based content apps, limiting content apps based on user role and content type, which I think that weird syntax was for. Speaking of which, though, no, we're not going to talk about the future.
Yep.
Nope.
No future. Plus you're,
No
running,
future talk
you're
yet.
running out of time.
Nope. Docs are there. Cool. Don't really...
No.
Well, do a demo if we got time later. How's that sound?
Yeah.
I think we're gonna cheat a little bit. So if you just close your eyes and imagine that the wheel actually hit the log viewer.
We'll give it one more try.
And this is logging.
Login!
This is logging.
Yes, logs can be sexy. Thank you, Shannon.
Do you need your notes or?
No.
Cool.
So in V7, we have this lovely text log file, which is always a pain to read. I never managed to kind of find any patterns and look through this stuff. But in V8, we have this notion of a JSON log. So in here, you can see there's a ton of stuff now. I can see what the type name is, what the process ID, the thread, machine name, yada, yada, yada. And I can add more properties to this if I really wanted to. But this means that I can now query and ask questions of my logs now. So yeah, JSON logs can query, and I can ask questions of our logs. So we can store additional metadata along with whatever you want to store. So we could ask, find all the logs that are taking greater than a second. Find all the logs that start with a specific namespace or has a specific property set. So
I can drive for you.
You drive, I talk. We're running out of time. So in V8, we have a shiny log viewer in the back office.
We want to go to the back office.
Yeah, go back office.
Okay. Test at test.com. Test, yes.
Does this also work for your Umbraco.com user account?
Yep. Yeah, that's the admin account for everything. Settings?
Yeah, settings, yeah. And down on the left, you can see we have this lovely overview.
Graphs.
Graphs. I can make Jeffrey happy. We have one graph now, yeah? So you can see, as a quick overview, this is kind of the logs for the day. I can see that, Shannon, your site's pretty shit. You've got 8 errors. You kind of really need to fix that. But yeah, you can see the graph as well below. I can get an overview. And then we have these kind of save searches. So I can say, I don't know, what one did you click?
These are
all logs. Okay, so you can click on all logs, and then you could, I don't know, pick one of them, and then we can see that this was an error, and then you could find, so if you go down, there was like Team Canada. You could then click, no, up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So then you would click it, and then it would create a query for you. So find me all the logs where the machine name is Team Canada.
So I can drill down, basically.
Yeah, you can drill down, and we can do more complex queries. But
And so maybe if I wanted to find, like I got process ID, or I think we have HTTP request number.
Yeah, exactly. So we can kind of find all the logs that are related to a specific request now.
Cool.
Very nice, yes.
So Warren, I have one question.
Yes.
If we switched all this stuff to Serilog, why do we still have the log4net log level in there?
To keep Stephane happy.
Okay.
So we had traditional text login. So the output is just to match up. So if you wanted to turn off JSON logs altogether and go back to the old format of text logs, you sure can. Thank you, Shannon. So, yeah, why Serilog? Basically, JSON logs, as it's been called, is message templates in the wider world. It's easy to extend in C#. So if you want to modify the JSON and you want to modify the login pipeline, you can. It's open source. It has a good community around it, like we are. Has a lot kind of a data sources to kind of send your logs. So rather than just storing these JSON logs files on disk, you can send it to like Datadog, Sec, SQL Server, Elasticsearch, Azure, wherever.
Why do I want to do that?
Well, maybe you're running like a load balance site and you want to pipe them all into one store now. So you want to pipe them to Datadog or something.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, that would be.
So if I got 20 front-end servers, and something's wrong with one, I don't have to go log into every single one.
No.
Find an error in one of the logs.
And then maybe like Datadog does alerting or something. If you get a certain number of errors, then go and send me a phone call or whatever.
Perfect.
So there's a couple of ways to use log messages. Okay, so I have two kind of properties, an event name and a basic integer. So the bad way to do this is to do, not to do even, string concatenation. But the good way is to see the bottom example. Yeah.
Yep. It's like string concatenation, but more just categories.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So don't put $1 in front of that.
No, please don't.
So the reason why you want to do this is basically that it will sort it into specific fields for you.
Yes, so event name would now become a property that I could search on, along with elapsed. So then I could then find all the log items that have a property of elapsed.
That's greater than a minute or something.
Yeah, then you have some shitty code. But yep, we have docs on this. We have how to change the log level. So showing how to add custom property to all your log items, how to configure the pipeline, how to log it to another data store, how to do those complex queries in the log view in the back office, and it's all nicely documented here.
So Warren, I have this problem that whenever I've been looking at my logs files, it's fairly easy to just open them.
Yeah.
Now it's just shit. So
Yes, that's the kind of problem. So we have this now kind of shitty file on disk that's like, oh, you can take it. It's pretty impossible to read. So what I've done is created a desktop app that runs on Windows and on a Mac, so it's cross-platform. So you can take that JSON file that lives on your server, that's unreadable, and now you get the similar kind of look and feel of what we got in the back office. So now you can do the same sort of things, page through, find relations, query it, got your nice graph again, so yeah.
Nice. Another cool feature that Stephane really likes.
Oh, yeah.
Because
Stephane doesn't like my JSON logs at all, so you can go, what, file, export as text file, and then I made Stephane happy again.
And now we're back to
the shitty text files that you seem to love.
That I love.
I don't know why. But I think that's login, yeah?
Nice. New.
Yeah. Woo!
Okay, let's not spin the wheel. Let's find, what's another really fun one?
check the wheel to see what's left, maybe.
We got 15 minutes. I know there's going to be questions, but we can quickly run through performance,
I think we should
or
do performance.
stats. Anyway, maybe I'll do stats really fast. This will be extra quick. Some stats. Right, lines of code from V7 to V8, 31% less in total. That's awesome. That is huge. That is an immense amount of saving code debt, right? Take photos, by all means. Yes. Project sizes, our build zip is actually up in V8, and that's because of the dependencies we ship with, not because of our code. And it's not a bad thing or anything. But our NuGet package file is much smaller. That's because we've got a code reduction. And the zip, when we zip our repository, is much smaller, and that's because of the code reduction. The project count, if you open the solution, we went from 16 projects to 7, and that's because most of the projects were weird, didn't make sense, had odd namespaces and stuff like that. Won't talk about the feature. Don't talk about the feature. Nope, right now we got 7. Yep. Build warnings, we went from almost 650 build warnings to 30. Those 30 are a mistake. They should be 0, and we can easily achieve that tomorrow, probably.
Did we just fix our rules, or did we actually fix the errors?
We should fix the rules now that we can.
Okay.
But yeah, we couldn't fix those other ones. Yep, so some good stats there. Nesta, we'll go down to something Stephane can talk about. Which one?
Performance, maybe?
Everyone likes performance.
Okay. Pick one.
This one. There you go. Go!
Can I have the thing and my notes? No, I don't have notes.
You don't have notes.
Okay, for performance. This is interesting.
Should we get the notes?
Now, performance was not the main goal of V8. The goal was to clean things up and add some features. The hope was that cleaning things up would improve performance, and that adding features would not be too damaging for performance. Performance is hard. We're all waiting for this book. It's going to be published this summer, and Andrei Akishin has been maintainer of benchmark.net, who's going to help us benchmark, because benchmarking is quite hard, especially when you start getting into memory things. So I don't know if you know this book, but it's that thick. It's horrible, but it's explaining why memory and how it works in .NET. So we've tried to benchmark things, and what are we seeing, like results? On rendering, which is basically what your sites are doing, so we feel that's the most important things. Rendering in version 7, it was an XML document that was all in memory. We were allocating iPublish content all the time. That's expensive.
And serializing.
And serializing things back and forth, using XPath to navigate the tree structure. That was slowish. And cloning a lot of things, basically cloning the entire XML tree whenever you start publishing or previewing. Version 7 is using native iPublish content. Link is fast.
That's because we're not serializing, deserializing.
Yeah. Well, we'll do it once, but then we keep them here.
Yeah.
It's fine grain, which means when you publish something, we just modify that content item, not the whole thing in memory. And it's abstracted, meaning that at the moment it is the new cache powering it, but that's just one implementation. And it would be fairly easy to replace that with another implementation should we want to, I don't know, improve things. Rendering, so this is from our friends doing uBenchmark. They're doing a good time at benchmarking how long it takes to render a page, and I think we can see that 8 is getting better and better and is way better than 7. This is basically 1/3 of the time. And this is on normal, like rendering one page. We've done benchmarking on load testing, like rendering a lot of pages at the same time. And the numbers, it can be even 5 times better. It's really, like rendering is a huge benefit.
I think on average, so on a non-optimized site on tests, we get at least, at a minimum, double the request per second output by doing nothing, just going from 7 to 8.
Yep. So that's uBenchmark. That is our own thing. So we are running .NET version 8, benchmarking it with some load testing that we do internally. This is fairly new, so we haven't talked about it a lot, but we're starting to do it. The diagram at the top is running version 7, rendering pages, publishing at the same time, and also from time to time previewing. The gray thing is the non-managed memory, like the whole memory used by the process, and the blue thing is the memory used by .NET. And what's a bit worrying with version 7 is that you see that we start using non-managed memory, so it's leaking outside of .NET. That's probably XML having some native implementation of things that we never sort of recover, so it goes up, 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 and it never comes back. The diagram at the bottom is doing the same thing with version 8, and we can see that the non-managed memory is quite stable, and even the .NET memory is stable. So it's faster, but it's also using less memory and stable. When I say using less memory, memory is horrible to benchmark. So if you look at the total memory used here, it's, I don't know if you can read, it says it's half a gigabyte. And when you're on your site, maybe, it's actually a gigabyte. But if you look at .NET, it says .NET is 100 megabytes. So what's in between? This is Windows, and when the CLR starts, it says, well, I have 8 cores, I'm going to create heaps and stacks and things and allocate memory in case I need it. So you're like, Umbraco is using tons of memory. And we're like, no, we are not. So,
and that's because it's Windows that reserves space. It doesn't mean that something else can't also move that space around. It's just like, I might need this, so I'll put it there. And another process might say, well, my space is growing, and that space will reduce. It doesn't mean that it's using a gig, and you'll never get that gig back. Right?
So to be completely honest, we're learning all these things, like how to benchmark things and give real numbers that like, make sense and see where we can optimize things. Now, coming from version 7, it's interesting that when we release version 8, the main concerns are documentation and optimizing. I think it tells a lot about how the whole thing runs. Like, nobody's complaining because it doesn't work. We're also working on other things, like the times it takes to start a site. We're on par with version 7, I think, but we can improve. How the services work, I think we're slower than version 7 when you save content, and the guys at Benchmark are saying the same thing. We've added variants, that takes time, so we're going to optimize it. We're working on the back office performance. We're working on concurrency, because the diagram I've shown with the memory going crazy with version 7, you also see tons of errors in the log saying 2 people were saving the same document at the same time and everything crashes, and you don't have that in 8 anymore. Memory, I was talking about it. The only thing I want to mention about memory, if I have time, is that what we're starting to see is that we have different concerns. So some of you are going to say, well, I have this big customer, they're running their own on-prem server, they have 32 gigs of memory. I don't care if Umbraco is using 4 gigs, I want it to be super fast. So give me the best you can. Have everything in memory run. We have other customers, one of them being a very annoying customer running tons of sites on an Azure infrastructure, and happening to be also my boss, so it's a little bit annoying. They keep asking us, we want the cloud sites to be small, like they can't use gigabytes, otherwise it's not profitable. So for them, we might want to have a different cache, where not everything is in memory. And the good thing with the cache abstraction is that we could do this, and we're thinking about having the cache.
We're not talking about the future.
No. The good thing in V8 is abstracted, and you could have your cache in a disk or Redis or other things.
Yep, the potential is there.
Yes, the rest is future.
Great. I think we do have other areas to discuss, but we don't have time. So we'll all be around for the next day or two, so let's just chat about them. But for now, let's take some questions. We got about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Do you guys have questions? Anyone?
I think there's one.
There's one.
Thank you. I have 2 questions. The first one is regarding to examine. Is there any way when you are building your own index, is there any way to specify how often it will rebuild the index?
It will never automatically rebuild. So if indexes are rebuilding, then something is configured incorrectly. Examine never rebuilds unless an index doesn't exist.
Right. Let's say if you have a content outside of Umbraco that you would like to index in Umbraco so that you can search it. So now I created, for V7, I've created some sort of cron job that goes and rebuilds it in a given interval.
Yeah, so instead of doing that, the way examine works with Umbraco is it listens to events. Right. So if something got saved, I'm going to add that item, and I just keep the index up to date. Rebuilding an index constantly is probably not great for performance and concurrency and all those things. So if you can figure out how to add an event to whatever data is happening, like
it's happening outside of Umbraco.
But it could be a webhook. I don't know what your data is, but it could be some event. You need to listen to that and then iteratively update. That would be the right way to do it.
Right.
But examine has nothing built into it to auto-schedule things and stuff like that.
Okay.
And in fact, examine 1 has less built into it than examine 0.9, because examine 1 now just says, I'm here, tell me what to index and I'll do it. Whereas it was trying to do more stuff before.
Right.
So now it's just like a shell. You just tell it what to do and it'll do it. So.
Thank you. The other question is regarding packaging.
Yeah.
Let's, for instance, take a custom package that adds some sort of document types in Umbraco. So if you have a source control and you would like to keep that and move it towards different deploy environments, what I used to do is firstly install the package using Umbraco, then install the NuGet package later to keep the source code. Is there any way to combine that? If I only want to use NuGet package, can I create some sort of first time installed script?
So you want like a code first approach for storing schema items, right?
Yeah.
I think our recommendation now, until you can get deploy on-prem, because Umbraco deploy does that essentially. There's usync, I think, is really the alternative community recommended thing to use. So if you haven't tried usync, it should do what you're talking about. Maybe not in the exact way that you're thinking, but I think it'll get you to where you want to go.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Any other? Oh, right. Is it possible currently to do non-language variants?
So just like arbitrary...
It's like an arbitrary variance, you might say like...
Yeah, so I guess, right now it's based on a language, but maybe a language to you means something else, right? And right now the language picker is based on real cultures. That's not really abstractable or anything that currently. But you could potentially use different languages for arbitrary things like A/B testing or something.
That's kind of what I think I thought.
Down the road, maybe later, we have this thing called segments, and a segment is based on just an arbitrary name, which is based on a variant. But that's like who knows how that's going to be implemented. And we don't currently have segments on a non-variant.
Segments are more or less there. Like at database level, we manage them. At service level, we manage them. But above that, we don't, because creating a UI was an insane task. So I have a task which is just to figure out what exactly works and document that. So you may be able to do a bit of segmentation, but you'll have to do some low-level work.
I think it would be a bad idea to go with languages for this, because you would have something like formatting also affecting this.
Yeah, and we've never tried.
Yeah.
So, but by all means, give it a go, because I think when we released variants, the first thing is we don't want to go too far with variants because we don't know how the community is really going to use it. And everyone's going to do some quirky things that we haven't thought of yet. And that's going to happen. And once these things start bubbling up, then we'll go, oh, right, maybe we should move this around or enable this feature. So, yeah.
And I think we're going to have to close it there. So if there's any additional questions, these gentlemen will be around for the remainder of the festival, so be sure to grab them. And let's give them one last round of applause for V8. Thank you.